Welcome to the Health Catalyst podcast, brought to you by YPO. Here we talk about the business of health innovation, and I sit down with industry leaders who have been in the trenches. My goal is to share the lessons and provide practical and actionable advice to help you launch, grow, and scale your business. I am your host, Rodrigo Hute. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. Jim Mault, CEO of BioIntelliSense. BioIntelliSense specializes in continuous health monitoring and clinical intelligence, both in the hospital and at home. Jim, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to the podcast.
Rodrigo, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm very excited to learn more about remote health monitoring, continuous health monitoring, and the new technologies that are emerging. So thank you so much for making the time. I want to start with some background information, and in particular, I wanted to ask you, what inspired you to start BioIntelliSense, and how did your previous experience shape the vision for the company?
Well, I guess in many ways, the old adage of necessity is the mother of invention. Really, my career as an entrepreneur started trying to pay the bills when I was a college and medical student, and started filing patents and creating small companies even back then. That progressed. I ended up training as a cardiothoracic surgeon and spent the first 20 years of my career at the bedside taking care of patients while starting these companies on the side. And I've always been a gadget geek and so forth. But really the impetus, the thesis behind BioIntelliSense started back in the late 90s as a heart and lung transplant and thoracic surgeon here in Denver. It was an unusual circumstance because geographically, in most other settings, whether it's Seattle, San Francisco, or the East Coast, when you send somebody home after a big operation like heart surgery, they go home 10, 20, 30, maybe 50 miles away. But in Denver, when we send somebody home, they go home to North Dakota and South Dakota and Wyoming, and that's 500 miles away. And so remote patient monitoring really became an obsession, frankly, of how do we figure out a way to easily monitor people, after a big procedure in the hospital, and do that in a way that's simple and cost effective. And so it's really been, BioIntelliSense is the hopefully endpoint. I think it's the grand finale of a 25-year journey that has spawned 5 different startup companies and a couple of IPOs and one deal that ended up at Microsoft and creating HealthVault 15, 20 years ago, and then another one that got acquired into Qualcomm. So it's been a real kind of education to start something de novo, with no employees, raise the capital, build the team, take things through FDA, and then commercialize them. And doing that inside of a big global multi-billion tech company, and lots of scars and bruises to show for it along the way.
I can relate to that. When I started a health tech company over 10 years ago, a lot of scars and bruises, and in particular, if you think about before I ask about this, can you please describe your core products, your flagship product. Maybe walk us through, some of the use cases just for the audience to understand what you guys do.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, it's always comes down to, the starting point is what problem are you trying to solve? And the real, and as I mentor and coach those that follow, the pay it forward obligation. My advice is start with a big idea. I mean, if you start with a small idea, that's all you're going to end up with. So start with a big idea, a big vision, a big problem, and how would you solve that? And what we're talking about here is a 100-year-old tradition of monitoring patients on an occasional snapshot, haphazard basis. That in the hospital means paying a human being to walk around once every 4 to 6 hours and take just a small snapshot of information. And then as doctors and nurses, we're supposed to figure out if that patient's okay or not. And number one, and then the other predicament when you send somebody home, that we effectively have no information, right? And for the basis of modern healthcare is it revolves around information. It's data driven, and if we don't have data, then we basically have no idea what's happening and what to do for you. So this predicament is being solved simultaneously with two things. One is changing the way we capture data, and this is, again, like I said, an evolution over the past 25 years. But where it ends up is the concept of a medical grade wearable that allows for what we call passive data collection. So, number one, it's very expensive to pay a human being to do anything these days, let alone measure vital signs. And if you can only get those vital signs, a few times per day, it's not a lot of information. So this changes everything when you can take something that's medical grade, so highly accurate, and stick it on somebody's chest. It's called a BioButton. And what that suddenly does is captures signal continuously off the human body. In this case, the traditional vital signs that are the key piece of information that every clinician needs to know about what's happening to these patients. So instead of one set of vital signs 4 times a day, we're now generating a full set of vital signs every minute, every hour, 24 hours a day. So you're talking about 1,440 data sets versus 4. So it's a huge difference in the information and the ability to see what's called trends. But that's on the hardware side. The other dimension to this is now we already have too much information to process and to analyze, and we're going to be generating dramatically. I mean, when you go from 4 to 1,400, the thought of paying a human being to watch all that data is an absurdity. So the other dimension to this that's equally important is the data science. Now, 25 years ago, when we started building these early versions of this, it was called math and algorithms. Today, we've got a very important buzz phrase called AI. And so, yes, this is, and we don't like talking about artificial intelligence as a as a catchphrase. There's a lot of hype around it, but I also think it's misguided because there's nothing artificial about it. And this is really clinical intelligence. What we want is to be able to take all that data and on behalf of smart doctors and nurses, reduce it down to actionable information in a scalable way. So in other words, if you're expecting doctors and nurses to look at all of this information, they're just not going to be able to see the subtle statistical patterns across multiple parameters. So we can do that in the cloud. We can do that using math and pattern recognition algorithms and reduce that to clinical intelligence. And so we basically have this device called the BioButton on the chest, goes up to the cloud, and then we have a remarkable clinical intelligence engine that reduces that down to what's called scalable exception management. And here's where the value creation is absolutely dramatic, because now you can affect and execute continuous monitoring of every patient in every hospital bed across multiple hospitals or in patients at home, either way, with one dashboard. We call it the Bio Dashboard, that is effectively showing you 300 patients on basically a stack of tiles, and the algorithm's watching the data. And if there's an anomaly, just like the cockpit of a commercial jet, you've got two pilots, but it's the autopilot system that's watching all the data from all the sensors on that modern jet and reducing it down to, here's what you need to know. Pull up, airspeed. And so this is effectively reducing it down for the benefit of clinicians, to make every clinician look like a genius, for us to be able to see what's happening to patients anywhere and be able to watch that data on our behalf and say, hey, out of these 300 people, here are the 3 that need someone's attention, and then escalate that. And so when you think about the scalability, now you've got one tech monitoring 300 patients each, and then one nurse that's responsible for 3 techs, which is 900 patients per nurse. And yet each of those patients is being monitored on a minute-to-minute basis. And you could never do that with human labor. It would be out of the question. It'd be so unaffordable. But we're able to do this on a scalable way for nothing more than what it would cost for a gauze pad per patient per day. So you're talking about $5, whereas nurse labor today is about $500 per 24 hours for a bedside nurse. So this is truly disruptive and transformational. And over the next 5 years, it'll be silly to imagine going into a hospital where, we're still going to have that person check on you once every 6 hours.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And are the main use cases like post-acute patients where doctors and nurses need to go and check on them on a regular basis, or any patient in a hospital bed could potentially use the BioButton?
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing, frankly, a pervasive level of adoption across every care setting. So in the hospital, no brainer. Put this on every patient in every bed, and the data flows, and you've got a command center that's able to see and watch continuous monitoring of every patient hospital-wide. So we've got vivid examples of that, and we've got over 250,000 patients that have been hospitalized, and we're doing 30,000 a month right now on the inpatient side. But then when it's time to go home, again, in the past, we'd send somebody home with a pat on the back and a list of things for the family and say, hey, family, dad just had heart surgery. Pay attention to all these things so dad doesn't die. And, I think it's cruel in many ways, that burden of responsibility that we put on families after, taking someone home from the hospital. And what this does is relieves that burden and says, hey, the hospital or someone will be able to monitor your mom and dad even after they go home. And if we see something starting to go the wrong way, we'll call you. The nurse will have a telehealth visit. We'll bring you into the doctor's office. But it's all about being proactive and not waiting for something bad to turn into a disaster and a 911 ambulance back to the hospital. And then we talk about chronic conditions, and whether it's heart failure or COPD, even hypertension, it's all about being able to have data and being able to know what's happening to someone. Is the medication working? And frankly, the benefits across even cancer patients and getting chemotherapy and having something that can keep an eye on them and make sure that they're safe and stable during their chemotherapy. So we're seeing this adoption even for direct consumer and kind of the family caregiver scenario where you've got an aging parent or grandparent, and it's expensive to think about paying for a home health nursing now. Most people couldn't afford it, but very soon you'll be able to go to even your retail pharmacy, sign up for one of these little buttons, have it on your grandmother or grandfather, and then have a monitoring service, just like your home alarm system, that can hopefully keep an eye on how grandma and grandpa's doing, and if there's health problems, be able to do something about it before it goes bad.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense in a hospital setting. It makes total sense at home as well. Let me ask you a question about the product. Like, what vitals or markers or indicators or metrics are you not able to show?
Well, I mean, it's a progression. So what we started with are the basics, which are, in medical school and nursing school, it's the most important vital signs. In fact, the single one most important vital sign, it turns out, is respiratory rate, breathing rate, which sadly is the one that gets overlooked because it's kind of hard to reliably measure. Even in the hospital, it's a number that doctors and nurses don't do a very good job of measuring. So respiratory rate, heart rate, and temperature are the starting points. Blood pressure is something that is routinely measured, particularly in the hospital. It turns out blood pressure isn't something that is a necessity on every patient all the time, every 4 hours, or certainly not continuously. But we're adding things like pulse oximetry and EKG for those patients that need it, and actually blood pressure as well. So ultimately, there'll be the basic vital sign button, and then there'll be the what we call BioButton Pro, loaded with all the goodies and for those patients that need it. But it's generally a a subset of patients that need pulse ox or EKG or blood pressure.
I see. Okay. And so I imagine that your customers are hospitals and health systems. When you approach them and pitch and sell your BioButton and other key products, like what's the things that makes them tick? Is it I'm giving you a technology that will help you reduce costs because you're gonna send less nurses every X number of hours to see all of these patients? Is it more the clinical aspect? Is it more the cost aspect? How have you been able to craft your messaging to being more effective?
Well, the starting point is making sure, and this is a mistake for a lot of early stage companies, is you have to offer a solution and not a piece part. In other words, if you have a piece and you hope the hospital is going to figure the other parts out and pull it together, that's not going to go well. So we come with an entire end-to-end solution. So and then you say, here's the solution. It includes the BioButton. It includes the data service and the analytics, and includes the dashboard. So it's an end-to-end solution. And then you can speak about the value creation of this end-to-end solution. And when you talk about value creation in healthcare, a few decades ago, and I'm old enough to have been there, a few decades ago in the 80s and 90s, it was better care at any cost. Everybody wanted the newest CT scanner and the newest MRI scanner, and it was just better care. And nobody asked how much it cost. If it cost more, that was fine. Today it's way different. So the value creation and the value proposition has to be, hey, we can help you take better care of your patients. Hopefully that's the number one priority. But we're going to help you take better care of your patients and reduce total cost of care. And for a hospital, that better care is pretty easy to demonstrate. Continuous monitoring allows us to be able to see patients starting to develop problems sooner, but that also helps reduce transfers to the intensive care unit. Well, that lowers cost. It also lowers length of stay because now the average patient hospitalization time goes down. In our system or our outcomes data, we're reducing length of stay already by an average of 9 hours across all hospital inpatient stays. But we're reducing 30-day readmissions after they leave the hospital. And we just published a 50% reduction in nurse labor associated with manual measurement of vital signs and entering all that data into the EMR. So what that's doing is, if nothing else, creating workforce efficiencies that allow you to be able to allocate that labor expense to other things that can improve patient care, get the patients out of bed, get them mobilized. And we know all of those things helps reduce length of stay. So it's just a winner in so many categories. And frankly, these days, you need to have those demonstrated outcomes benefits to really get the attention of the C-suite of both hospital systems, providers, and the payers, which that's exactly what we're enjoying right now.
Yeah, and I can see the benefits to both clinical outcomes and cost reductions and all of that. So it's great. It sounds like a very comprehensive end-to-end solution. Sounds amazing. So is your talking about your business model? Is this like a SaaS model, subscription based, that they pay on a monthly basis? How do you think about how would you describe it?
You nailed it. And that was another, I would say, fundamental construct is finding a way to strip out the cost. Our goal, my vision is nothing short of ubiquity. If we get this right, this needs to be a part of the fabric of care. Is the way, just going forward, this is how you take care of people. That means it has to be extremely low cost and a low burden of implementation. Mm-hmm. So, if it's a lot of work to initiate and set it up, then that's labor, right? And you don't want that. So it was designed to be literally no more effort than a Band-Aid. So human factors and ease of use. So if someone can put on a Band-Aid, you can put one of these on, and it's what we call stick it on and forget it. It's waterproof. You can soak in the tub. It's not going to come off. So it's literally put it on when the patient gets admitted, and there's nothing else to do during their entire hospitalization, number one. Number two is a lot of companies have built disposable devices. Disposable means electronics that have to be thrown away each time. Somebody has to pay for those electronics. That's cost of goods, and that gets passed on to the customer. So we purposely engineered this to be a multi-patient rechargeable. So in that case, what we're doing is stripping out the hardware cost to effectively zero, because this can be used over and over, patient after patient, month after month, year after year. So if you amortize the hardware cost, it basically goes to near zero. And then it's got a little charging station so that, 10 of them are sitting at the charging station. When a patient comes in, you pop it out, put it on the patient. When the patient leaves, you take it off, rinse it, clean it, put it back in the charger. So long-winded, that turns it into a SaaS subscription model. So this is per patient or per bed per year, and it just includes the devices. So we don't even sell the hardware. It's a data service. And in the hospital, it's per bed per year. In the home, it's per patient per month.
Makes a lot of sense, and I think it's very smart what you said about like being able to reuse the hardware. Makes a lot of sense, and I think it's very smart. What are some of the key barriers to adoption that you've seen? I mean, it sounds that you've been developing this great technology, end-to-end solution with data analytics. You're probably adding an AI algorithm as well to help doctors make better decisions. It sounds great. It really sounds great. And I wonder, how much competition are you facing? And I also wonder, what are some of the key barriers to adoption? I would imagine that, if you come to me and I'm a hospital, I would say yes in 5 seconds, right? So what are some of the struggles and barriers that you have encountered over the last
few years? This is the absolute textbook classic crossing the chasm scenario. You've got, you start with healthcare, which inherently is slow to change. And for good reason. This is not like a new gadget that comes out and we all buy one. And there's consequences to healthcare being trendy, right? People's lives are at stake. So with that, there's a natural. I wouldn't call it distrust. It's more, hey, what we're doing seems to be working, and introducing anything new I need time to see it and trust it and learn how to do something differently than I've been doing for 100 years. You have to remember, we're coming in and we're kind of blowing up a tradition, embedded behavior for 100 years. So that's the hardest piece. You're exactly right. At the C level, you show this to the CEO, the chief medical officer, the CIO, the chief innovation officer. They go, oh, this makes all the sense in the world for all those reasons. But then you get down into the trenches. Some people are very threatened because what we're doing is automating what has been 100-year-old manual process that somebody got paid for. And there are some people that go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Are you saying you don't need me anymore? And no, that's not the case. There's still pilots in the cockpit, but we're automating the data capture and the analysis so you can be a better pilot. And so it's all about education, and it's all about trust building. And then they get to see it working. And then there's this epiphany. And that's the magical moment when somebody suddenly sees, and clinicians are, you cannot debate it with me. Overwhelmingly, clinicians are committed to taking as great care as they can of their patients. We take pride in that. It's more than a job. It really is a dedication to helping people. And so with that foundation, this epiphany occurs in the first couple of weeks when the nursing staff and the medical staff suddenly see all the things that they didn't ever see before with these occasional measurements. Now we see this continuous stream, and then we're able to show, oh, by the way, this patient crashed and had a code blue, but with the BioButton data, back here 18 hours earlier, our algorithm would have told you this patient was starting a pattern that's going to likely crash in a few hours. And then their eyes go, whoa. And then this epiphany occurs, and it's like, God, I never knew how much we were missing. And people go, and there's no going back. Once you get that epiphany, you got them. And then you talk to the hospitals and nurses where this is fully implemented now, they laugh at the thought of going back to the old days, where somebody was walking around room. But it's a process that takes time, and that's about 6 months to a year.
Yeah, I can see that, and very very quickly, I've shared with you before the episode, the interview, that I started a digital health company in Latin America in 2013, and we built a software to help providers, doctors, and clinics to be more efficient in scheduling appointments, in sending reminders, and so on. And it was very interesting that doctors said, yes, I need that. I love it. I want to use the product. And then their assistants and their secretaries, they looked at us like threatened. And they told us, this is great. And yeah, I love it. And they gave us like lip service. Yeah, we're going to use it. But then when we turned around, they didn't use it. So it took a lot of education. And that leads me to the next question, which is, what has been the most effective from an educational perspective where you have been able to overcome those objections, if you will?
Yeah, the objection management, right? I mean, the first and foremost is with every startup, these learnings build upon themselves, right? You do the first one, it's awful. It's, you just get, but hopefully you learn what works and what doesn't work, and then you have to be highly iterative. So we've now had the benefit of, 2.5 years of real world implementation and scalability. And man, it's now, I mean, I have to say, it's pretty much bulletproof. We've got pretty much everything figured out on how to, very successfully and effectively install, train, implement. It's a blueprint. Now it's reproducible, and it's really fun once you get to that point. It's painful getting there, but now it's we know how to implement it and install it with any kind of EMR. We know how to train the staff. But then what's exciting is now we're publishing all the outcomes data.
Yeah.
And then you have all the reference accounts that say, yep, we installed this across 8 hospitals, and they're bragging to the world, look at what we're now doing and how good our patient care is and our outcomes. And so that becomes, again, it becomes kind of a snowball effect, and it makes, it makes each of the next ones easier and easier. And hospital also, or healthcare doesn't trust a vendor generally, because obviously they look at us as somebody trying to sell them. So once you have more and more reference accounts, so hospitals can talk to each other and they can say, hey, what do you think of this? And they go, we love it. And that makes it easier for them to say, okay, if they like it, then we'll do it.
Yeah, the social proof, and the references and
yeah, and
reviews.
it's it's there are leaders, and then most are followers, and so you get those leaders, successful, and use them as showcases and reference accounts, and then the followers tend to line up.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have to ask this question, which is kind of the difference between medical grade monitoring and kind of consumer wearables that are in vogue right now. But what's your opinion? What's your opinion of medical grade wearables like BioButton versus consumer grade devices like Apple Watch or the Aura Ring or others that are in the market, for remote patient monitoring?
Yeah, that's a really, really important concern. And sadly, we saw a very vivid example of that during COVID, specifically with pulse oximeters. And I sit on a few standards committees that have been doing the postmortem on this issue. But during COVID, the FDA had 510K level clearance of pulse oximeters for what we call prescription use. But your retail pharmacy was out there selling non-medical grade pulse oximeters that are generally useful for fitness and sometimes aviation and so forth. Now, here's the thing, is during COVID, you had people who were really sick with pneumonias and dying at home. And a doctor would say, we don't have room for you in the hospital because the hospital's full of COVID patients who are sicker than you. But get a pulse oximeter and check that at home. Well, the problem is these over-the-counter consumer pulse oximeters had no clinical accuracy. And they work fine at saturations of 90 and above. Well, that's because people exercising, healthy, normal people, never have sats below 90. But when you're really, really sick, you need something that's clinically accurate that can measure at SATs of 80 and even 70. So bottom line is medical grade matters when you're sick. And as a physician or a health system or a payer, you're not going to make life and death decisions based on the measurements from a Fitbit or your Apple Watch. They're great for fitness and exercise and wellness. And you also have to look at it from the clinician side. The FDA is an enormous barrier to entry because it requires quality management systems. It requires documentation of every function and specification, and then what's called validation and verification that here's the spec and here's validation and verification that it meets that spec. Then you have to do crush testing, shock testing, heat testing. Now there's cybersecurity regulations and requirements. All of these things make medical grade matter when it comes to life and death patient monitoring. So sorry.
No, thank you. And I agree that it makes a big difference. Do you have a comment on the potential of these consumer wearables like the Oura Ring, and do you think it's a fad? Do you think people are going to be wearing them just because it's fun and trendy, or do you think they're going to hit a
Yeah, I mean, so in the consumer world, for the most part, you've got reasonably healthy, normal people who are the mainstay of that audience and those customers. You've got the fitness and exercise market, which is 10% of the market, triathletes and marathoners and bikers and so forth. And it's a solid place for that. I think, when we talk about for wellness and health monitoring, these devices are generally good as long as their accuracy is reasonable. The problem is there's no one, when they buy these, they really don't know, is this accurate plus or minus 5% or 10%? I kid you not. And I sit on the board that looks at these things, step counters and sleep monitors. Accuracy could be plus or minus 20%, right? Mm-hmm. So, so I think it's good for generating a sense of understanding and awareness about your body and what these numbers might mean. So I think overall it's a great thing. The persistence, we saw this with the original step counters 10 years ago. Everybody bought a Fitbit and wore it for 3 months. And then you figure out, I generally walk about 5,000, 6,000 steps a day. And then there wasn't any stickiness. Yeah, so everybody put those in a drawer. So the question is, how much stickiness is there, and what will people pay on an ongoing basis? And what you're still seeing is there's very few people that will pull money out of their pocket for month to month kind of
for a long time. Yeah,
for the consumer wearable stuff.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Final question before we go. We're wrapping up, but I wanted to ask you about the trends in the home health space. So, lots of experts are saying, healthcare is going to the home, not so much to the hospitals. There is a big trend in the aging population. So what's your perspective, just in a few words? And I think we're going to have to do another episode because I have so many more questions. But for now, it's like, what's your opinion in home health?
Yeah, there's absolutely no debate. You're seeing finally the the decentralization of healthcare delivery, and especially hospital care, and things like the BioButton. Now we could put a button on somebody in very simple terms, cost-effective terms, monitor somebody at home as easily as we monitor them while they're in the hospital. So therefore, paying for a $2,000 per night hospital bed is going to be hard to justify, because we could have a lot of those people monitored in their home just as effectively and way more cheaply. And so what you're going to see is hospitals will start to be able to shorten length of stay and offload more and more people into the home and monitor them at home very effectively. If they are developing a problem, we can do a telehealth visit. We can send somebody to the house. We can bring them to the clinic. And all of those things are still cheaper than having them sit in a hospital bed. So, when you look at hospitals, where are they going in the next 10 years? Hospitals will become, primary services are, if you need surgery, you probably still need to go to a facility, but it's probably going to be a day surgery center.
Yeah.
And now you're getting your hip replacement, your knee replacement same day and going home without staying in the hospital overnight. So that more and more is same day surgery, short-term stays. And then if you need the intensive care unit, that's the reason to still be in the hospital.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. All of this, you're going to see, there was a great McKinsey white paper a few years ago talking about, easily $250 billion of economics that are in the process of shifting from facility-based care to delivery of that care in the home.
In the home, yeah. I agree. I agree with that. I haven't seen that paper, but I 100% agree in that trend.
Yeah, I'll send it. Great. It was very well written. And it's a 11-page article, and remote patient monitoring is cited 19 times.
Yeah. All right. Jim, thank you so much. This has been super fun. I've learned a lot, and thank you for your time, and I appreciate you, and thanks everybody else for watching and listening today. Thank you, and until the next time.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks.